Okay, in the last video, I briefly introduced you to the four main models that we're going to be learning about. And this video is about the first of those models, which I've entitled Atheistic Evolutionism. So this is a model that is, as you can tell from the name, atheistic. So it assumes that there is no God, and so therefore there is no supernatural, and therefore the Bible is simply an uninspired ancient text, and therefore the Bible doesn't really have anything helpful to say about origins or the history of the universe or of humanity. So where do we go for information about the history of the universe and Earth and life? We go to science. So atheistic evolutionism is going to rely heavily on science, but basically say that it's an unguided and ultimately purposeless process. So let's learn more about it. Okay, so here are the pillars of atheistic evolutionism. I'm going to show you the pillars or main ideas of each of the models as we move forward. And I could go on and on about these, but I've tried to succinctly summarize some of the main ideas. So let's start with number one. Number one, this model presumes, like I mentioned, that there is no God. So the Bible is a human text, and therefore the Bible doesn't have a role to play in building a model. Number two, the universe and everything in it has a natural origin. So the universe came about on its own. The universe evolved or changed over time on its own. Life originated on its own. Cells originated on their own, and so on and so forth. So it's an unguided process with no God or gods pushing the buttons and pulling the levers. So number three, that means that life evolves due to evolutionary mechanisms alone. So it's random. Again, it's not guided, which means that our minds come from our brains, and our brains evolved, and that when our brains die, when we die, our mind goes with it. And so consciousness, and therefore the existence of an individual, ceases at the moment of their death, which means that there is no soul or afterlife. Morality emerged from human social interactions. Morality is a human construct. So we construct our own moralities within different cultures throughout time. And morality mostly serves to keep us from, as an attempt to keep us from killing each other and robbing each other. Okay, so let's talk about atheistic evolutionism and the concept of God. This view says that knowledge is based on evidence. So in order for something to exist, science has to be able to detect it or to measure it or to fit it into its theories. And so the evidences for the physical world, for the natural world, abound. We can measure atoms and weigh molecules, and we can study the anatomy and physiology of animals and so on. But when it comes to God and the supernatural, it basically exists outside of the realm of science. And so God is a concept that's not supported by the evidence. All of the evidences for God or for the supernatural come from theology, or come from culture, or come from religious texts, and basically stem from the imagination. So God cannot be detected and cannot be supported by observation and experimentation. So where does he come from? The concept of God comes from our imagination. So throughout human history, different people at different times have come up with various concepts of a God or gods. And once they've come up with the concept of a God or gods, then they imagine that they're that God's messenger, or they imagine that they receive communication from that God or those gods. And so the imagination is ultimately the source of concepts about God. So that means that atheistic evolutionism creates two tiers of reality. So there's the physical reality, and this is the physical reality of molecules, and molecules are made out of atoms, and atoms are made out of subatomic particles, and there's laws of physics and laws of chemistry that guide these atoms and molecules as they interact. And so science is the best methodology for understanding how this physical reality works. Science allows us to study atoms and molecules and cells. It allows us to attempt to predict how they'll behave. It allows us to build technologies. And so science is an ever-changing, ever increasing in knowledge process that further illustrates how this physical reality is constructed. The second reality is the realm of imagination. So this isn't a reality in the sense that it actually exists. This is a reality that we build with our minds. So the realm of imagination only exists in human minds. It doesn't exist anywhere else. So if human minds were to disappear, then this imagination realm would disappear as well. There's lots of different things in this imagination realm, but mythologies are important because mythologies are stories that illustrate something that people are interested in. So mythologies might illustrate where the rain comes from, or what happens after we die, or how the leopard got its spots, or how Luke Skywalker became able to use the Force. I don't know. Those are all different examples of mythologies from various cultures throughout time. So as an example of an ancient mythology, there is a tablet that dates back to somewhere around the 3rd or 4th millennium BC, and it's from a Sumerian epic called Enmerkar and the Lord of Arada. And I'm probably not saying that correctly, but here's an excerpt from it. Enki, the Lord of abundance and of steadfast decisions, the wise and knowing Lord of the land, the expert of the gods, chosen for wisdom, the Lord of Eridug, shall change the speech in their mouths, as many as he had placed there, and so the speech of mankind is truly one. Okay, so basically this is an ancient mythology that is attempting to explain where different languages came from. And it's saying that the different languages that humans speak are of supernatural origin. So they came from this Sumerian god Enki. And so if, as I read that, that probably rings some bells if you've heard the story of the Tower of Babel before. And so atheistic evolutionism says that, look, people have been building mythologies to explain things that they didn't understand for a long time. And this is an example of one explanation of where different human languages came from. And likewise, the Tower of Babel story in Genesis is a similar mythology that attempts to explain the same thing. So we have the physical reality, and then we have imagination that builds mythologies. And the imagination also builds religions. So once gods and a god are codified, then they can build religions. And religions are basically codes of belief and behavior that build social coherence and also help regulate human behavior. So, in other words, religions just come from our minds. Religions are made up, sometimes by one person, but oftentimes by many people over many years. The ideas behind these mythologies and these religions get shaped by our imagination as cultures change and as we get new ideas and so on. And so, atheistic evolutionism points out that everyone is an atheist to some degree. So even if someone is a theist, so let's say that they're Jewish and they believe in the God of the Hebrew Bible, of the Jewish Bible, then that means that they don't believe in the Egyptian gods, or they don't believe in the Hindu gods, or they don't believe in the Greek pantheon. And so atheists say that, look, we agree with the disbelief of religious worldviews, right? So in other words, if you're Jewish and you think that the Egyptian gods don't exist and the Greek gods don't exist, we agree with you. But as Richard Dawkins put it, we are all atheists about most of the gods that humanity has ever believed in. Some of us just go one god further. So they say that basically everyone believes in their God and they disbelieve in the gods of other cultures and other religions, but atheists don't believe in any gods. And so if we return to this graphic, this means that if imagination is spawning mythologies and religions, then written sacred texts like the Bible are coming out of these mythologies and out of these religions. So by extension, then, the Bible is created by the creativity and the imaginative capacities of human writers. And so, yeah, I pulled this off the internet. So Using something like the Bible as proof that God exists would be equivalent to using a Spider-Man comic book to show that Spider-Man exists. Both the God of the Bible and Spider-Man are figments of the human imagination. So for atheistic evolutionism, they think that the physical reality is all there is, and again, science is the best way to understand how that works, and that the realm of imagination is just that. It's a bunch of ideas and fantasies, and it has no rooting in an objective or observable world. So that means that atheistic evolutionism is going to accept the Big Bang. And so the Big Bang basically happened because of the laws of physics. So there are certain laws that are in place that allowed the universe to expand and develop from energy and matter into atoms and into molecules and ultimately into stars and galaxies. And then on planet Earth, at least, some of those molecules were able to come together and form life. Natural processes work on Earth as well. So the continent shifting over 100 million years or so is just evidence of natural processes at work. This is a DNA molecule. Where did it come from? According to atheistic evolutionism, this is not a molecule that was created by a supernatural designer. Rather, it was something that came together on its own. So DNA is a natural molecule that self-assembled. So nature made this. Similarly, evolution is random and unguided, so life evolved over time. And so again, there's no supernatural designer guiding this or leading it in a direction that would produce humans. All of the different species that exist now and in the past are simply products of evolutionary processes and evolutionary mechanisms. So we can see the fossil record here. And evolution did this. So again, evolution is behind, it's the mechanism behind animals changing over time. This means that moral acts like murder are human constructs. So in other words, morality isn't given from a god or gods on high. Morality is something that humans form and shape. So we have determined that murder is wrong. And the reason for that is murder tends to disrupt a society. And so human rights and concepts of right and wrong belong in the imaginative realm and don't coincide with physical reality. What about humans? So this is these are some of the hominin species, and then Homo sapiens at the top. And so these are the ones that we've talked about before. And so according to atheistic evolutionism, all of these species evolved, and Homo sapiens are simply one branch on this evolutionary tree. So Homo sapiens are simply primates, and these primates all have varying abilities. So some can make tools, and some could master fire, and some could, like humans or Homo sapiens, could create art and play music. And basically these different abilities, again, they're not given by a supernatural being, but they exist because these species have all evolved in different ways. So if humans are just primates and there is no supernatural reality, then that means there's no afterlife, and it means that you and I are just piles of atoms. And this means that the mind is the brain. The brain is a bunch of atoms that have come together to form cells, and those cells work together to create human thoughts and emotions. And your concept of self is generated by your physical brain. And so Sean Carroll, a physicist, summarizes this pretty nicely in this quote. The mind is the brain is made of atoms. We know how atoms work. They are not a mystery to us, and they work in such a way that when you die, there is no way for the information that was you to persist after death. There is no way for that set of beliefs that made you to leave your body, because they are left there decaying with your body. So when we die, our brain dies and our mind dies and we die, and that's the end. And the atoms that made up our body when we were alive disintegrate and come apart and are incorporated into other organisms. That sums up the first model. See you at the next.